This week in the astrology, reality begins to set in after a very explosive Monday. And that's because on Monday, Uranus enters Gemini, which is the last outer planet ingress into a new zodiac sign, kind of completing the trifecta of us going into a new era of time. And it's really exciting. There's going to be a lot of curiosity. But just after that, later on this week, we're going to be having the full moon in Capricorn. And the full moon in Capricorn is a revelation, or at least an illumination of things that you don't always get to see. And the moon's in detriment in Capricorn. So it's about emotions that maybe you don't want to feel and highlighting things that maybe you don't want to see, which is characterized by Saturn. Saturn rules Capricorn, and Saturn is fallen in Aries. And this week, Saturn goes retrograde, where the work is cut out for you and the reality begins to set in of what you need to be doing, and that it's going to actually be a little bit more difficult. But with this weekly horoscope, I'm going to be telling you exactly how to use it to your advantage, so it's not all the way bad. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome back to the Astrology Report, this time for July 7th through July 13th of 2025. My name is Cam White, and all I do is talk about astrology, and I tell you not only how to use it, I teach it to you, but how to use it to your advantage, not be a victim to it. So if you're interested in stuff like that, subscribe below, comment below, let me know what's going on for you this week, especially for Saturn going retrograde, especially if you're a part of the 90-day challenge members that, when I launched about a little over a month ago. This is kind of a very interesting pivot point in the 90-day challenge stuff. So let's just go ahead and jump right into it. So we start Monday off with the first highlight, which is Uranus entering Gemini. It enters really early Monday morning, and I think that's a really exciting way to start the week off. We have Venus making a trine to Pluto as our second highlight of the week, or I should say our second highlight of the day, and then the moon is going to be making a trine to Mercury and squaring Mars as it's in Sagittarius. Monday's really fun, and the thing I wrote down for Uranus entering Gemini is Kramer busting through the door. If you watch Seinfeld, I'm actually a part of a Seinfeld group chat where all we do is quote Seinfeld. So you might think you're a Seinfeld fan. You do not beat me and my team and my friends that absolutely live, breathe, and eat Seinfeld. But anyway, I think a lot about Kramer busting through the door because Uranus is all about, again, chaos. It is sudden. It is shocking. It is destabilizing, and this is something that I just started talking about in my July monthly rising horoscopes, and those are for members over on my website. So if you want to get access to those, check those out. But Uranus going into a new zodiac sign is exciting, right? And the thing that I'm trying to coach people on is experiment with things, have curiosity. However, if Uranus is going into a part of your chart, a house in your chart that you want more stability in, that you're not looking to try new things in, that might be a little bit more chaotic and unstable in a way that you don't necessarily like. Uranus is really shocking and, again, unstable. It is destabilizing. So there's going to be a part of your life that all of a sudden gets shook up a little bit. Now, if you're someone that is looking for that change, which I'm going to assume most of you are, then this is going to be really exciting. But Uranus is going to be here for the next 8 years. And I talk about it on my Uranus and Gemini video. If you haven't watched that already, go ahead and check that out. But this is an 8-year-long transit. It's not going to revolutionize yourself overnight unless you have planets at really, really early Gemini or Virgo or Sag or Pisces. But with that being said, what I've looked at with Uranus is it's experimenting with something. Have some curiosity over this new area of your life. Try something new. Do you remember being a kid and you didn't have any preconceived ideas of how things are supposed to work and you just let yourself be open and curious to things? That's how I want you to look at Uranus going into whatever house it's in, is kind of take off your preconceived notions and ideas about that area of your life and be open to something new. Investigate something, research something, because it's going to set off an 8-year period of you experimenting, trying new things. And it is going to be very liberating. It is going to be very shocking. It is going to be very up and down. We'll be talking about this, of course, for the next few years. But as we start this week off, we started off with this fresh and invigorating energy that something, new and something different is happening in your life, which if you're someone that's stagnant and needs that, well, that's really exciting. And this is the most exciting time of the week. There's all of this new shock, there's all of this new change, and that's going to set the foundation for why this week starts to get serious. So the second highlight is Venus making a trine to Pluto. Venus is in Gemini, she's trining Pluto in Aquarius. Look, the big thing here is there's the thing I wrote down was intense and powerful connection, right? Intense and powerful connections. Venus is about pleasure and fun and relationships, and in Gemini, she's very talkative, she's very flirty, she's very distracted, she's very here and there. But Pluto, which is about fears and power, they're making a trine to one another. So there's something about whether you're being curious or just being more open and talking to people than maybe you usually would, there's some sort of powerful connection going on here. Now, I would also argue that it's more important to see what triad of houses the air signs rule in your chart, because if it's your 8th and your 12th, then that's not necessarily social houses, but more connection and powerful ideas with connections. But that's a different story. So while Uranus goes into Gemini and we have this kind of exciting curiosity in a new area of your life, and Venus trines Pluto, where there's this kind of powerful connection and powerful people that can maybe show you the way a little bit more, we do have the moon in Sagittarius making a trine to Mercury and squaring Mars almost exactly at the same time. And the thing I wrote down was like confidently loud and disruptive. Like the moon's in Sag where it like, wants to joke and have fun and have banter, and Mercury's in Leo where, I have Mercury in Leo. So I just talk really loudly. It's really hard for me to speak quietly. But then it squares Mars in Virgo almost at the exact same time. And it reminds me of, when you like, it's like talking loud in a library. You have people in the library that want quiet and they're like focusing and they're studying and they get really angry about fucking everything. The moon making that trine to Mercury is like a sudden outburst of like, laughter or fun, but that it disrupts something. So it's kind of a weird, it's kind of a weird thing. I think you'll feel it in the moment because they both happen at the exact same time of like, oh, this is really fun and exciting, but it disrupts this one thing and it's not going according to plan. So Monday has a kind of a weird lunar day. Although the moon's in Sagittarius, it's much more fun and exciting. There is something about the fun and excitement that, disrupts or causes tension in another area of your life. Then we get to Tuesday and the moon is just void. Like there's nothing going on Tuesday. Now watch, every time I say this, I'll be like, nothing's going on. And someone will be like, Cameron, the fucking world ended on Tuesday and you said nothing's going to happen. Shut up. Number one, I'm just telling you guys the astrology. The moon's void. When the moon's void, nothing's really happening. Nothing's going to come out of stuff. And so like when it comes to if you want to start something, if you're trying something new, the moon being void just means nothing's really going to come of it. And so that could be good. Tuesday's a really good day for just nothing going on. Maybe you can catch up on some stuff. Maybe you can just kind of relax and sit down. And the moon's in Sagittarius where maybe there's just a little bit of like a adventure. Like if you're someone like me, every now and then I'll like resist working and I'll just go drive somewhere and go fuck off for the day and then, come back and catch up on all my work. But the moon being void on Tuesday just means nothing's really going on. And so, don't put too much pressure on yourself. And I wonder how much of it is just kind of like really sitting in the Uranus and Gemini energy of like more, curiosity and excitement and looking at that area of your life that is now getting shook up. So then we get to Wednesday. And on Wednesday, the moon is going to ingress into Capricorn. It will then square Saturn and Neptune, and then the moon will start to go opposite Jupiter for the rest of the day. So this is when the seriousness of the week kind of starts coming in. Because as the moon goes into Capricorn, the moon is going to be in detriment, right? And I think I've been thinking so much. I love teaching astrology because it's been forcing me to really think about certain concepts and ideas. And I've been obsessed with the sun and moon lately and the contrast between dark and light. And if you're a student, you know what I'm talking about. But the moon is about the internal. It's about how we feel on the inside. And because the moon rules emotions and because the moon waxes and wanes and you don't always see it, we don't always really get to see what's going on the inside. And the full moon is about revealing what's going on inside. But the moon is in detriment in Capricorn. Where the moon thrives is Cancer, where we can be sensitive, we can be open, we can feel our feelings. But the moon being in Capricorn has a detachment from it. The moon in Capricorn is like, I have to like harden my feelings for this moment. So as the moon goes into Capricorn, there's a little bit, and I've talked a lot about I like having the moon in Capricorn because it's a time to somewhat detach from our emotions and just get some work done. But as the moon goes into Capricorn on Wednesday and we kind of have that feeling, it starts to square Saturn and Neptune. And the issue here is Saturn is about, again, discipline, restrictions, and boundaries, and it's fallen in Aries. So as Saturn's been in Aries, we realize, wow, we have a lot on our plate. Maybe we've overcommitted to a lot of things. It's harder to, enforce boundaries. It's like you either have really weak boundaries or you really like lay it down in a way that really isn't all that positive. And so the moon in Capricorn has this like emotional detachment, but it squares Saturn in Aries where there's this like, I have to like suck it up and it's hard shit to do. And I don't want to do it. And the moon squares Neptune too, where now that Neptune's retrograde, we're starting to see where we had this ideal, we had this vision, and the glitteriness is starting to wear off. We're starting to see that there's a gap between who we are right now and where we want to be. And that can make you feel insecure, make you feel like you're not good enough. And I don't think that's the point. Because again, I just talked about this in my July rising sign horoscopes. Saturn's about reality and Neptune's about fantasy. These two planets are trying to kiss each other. They are trying to blend and merge together. But it's not right now. It's in February. And so if you have, again, I've been thinking a lot about how so much of my life is like trying to make fantasy and ideals into reality. Like that's all my life is right now. And that's for February of next year. But you're going to feel it this week. And especially next week too, because Saturn and Neptune are going to be so close to one another. And what I'm trying to say is now that Neptune is retrograde and Saturn's about to go retrograde too, you're going to feel like you just missed it. Like you just missed the bus. You airballed that shot. And what I don't want you to do is get insecure and upset, like, well, that means I can't do it anymore. It's just, no, you were that close, and that should motivate you even more to get to it. And this is why I like astrology, because the timing isn't for right now. The timing is next year. So you didn't miss anything, actually. And it's this feeling of getting close to it that should inspire you to work harder, apply yourself more. And so as the moon squares Neptune, though, there is this little bit of like, seeing where your expectations don't match reality, seeing where maybe, where you are right now versus where you want to be, and just seeing that gap. And I think that's really important. And so the thing I wrote down was like, time to get serious. And it's time to get serious. And there's this lack of ability to like connect with things. So then the moon goes opposite Jupiter though. And so the moon's in Capricorn, where again, emotions are a little bit shut off, a little bit detached. Now we're in this full moon moment that technically happens the next day. But the thing I wrote down was a lack of empathy prevents blessings. So Jupiter in Cancer is trying to give, right? That's all Jupiter in Cancer wants to do is give more and give greater and have more abundance. And the moon being opposite that is this resistance. One time, I'll tell you this much. In white people culture, we're kind of like detached from things. And something I learned when I was DJing weddings is you never, ever, ever, ever tell a Mexican family, no thanks, I don't want a plate of food. Everyone will hunt you down and kill you. You have to accept their food. And at the time, there was a few times during weddings where there's one time I had this wedding where we weren't allowed to drink on the job. And I kind of got a little bit in trouble for that just recently before this. And the parents of the bride were coming up to me, like we're talking, we're having a good time. And they're like, oh, take a shot with us. It's like, oh, no, sorry, I can't take a shot. And they're like, no, you need to. And I was like, no, I really can't. And the dad literally came up to me and grabbed me, pulled me in. He's like, I paid $50,000 for this wedding. You're going to take a fucking shot if I tell you to. And I was like, all right, we're partying. And so that's just what that reminds me of, is that there's this resistance to wanting to receive. There's this resistance to wanting to give. And so it's one of those things where maybe you're not, maybe you're a little bit detached from it. Maybe you're not really in that place of receiving right now. And so it's really weird how the moon, is in Capricorn. We have this detachment. It's square Saturn and Neptune, where there's this really hard resistance. But Jupiter in Cancer is trying to give you something. Jupiter in Cancer is trying to have you, give something to someone else. But there is this kind of like emotional resistance where maybe you don't want to feel that way. Maybe you're not ready to receive yet. And so that's why I kind of put lack of empathy is preventing blessings. So or this lack of connection, or this lack of openness and vulnerability is preventing you from getting maybe what you need. And so maybe on Wednesday, even though you might be a little bit more hardened at this time, maybe it's also important to recognize where you can open up. That brings us to Thursday. And on Thursday, the moon is going to be in Capricorn. It's going to make a trine to Mars in Virgo. Great. And we have the full moon in Capricorn. Look. Moon's going to trine Mars. We are locking in. We are plotting. We are planning. And we are scheming. Mars is in Virgo. Yes, it's going to be conjoining the South Node here soon. But Mars in Virgo is very detailed and surgical and acute. It has a plan. It has this list. And I think the moon in Capricorn trining Mars in Virgo is like being able to just check out and do what's on your task list. Not get, confused or distracted, but just locking in, scheming, plotting, planning, all of that. I like it. But that brings us to the full moon. And this is where the reality sets in, because Saturn rules Capricorn and Saturn is motionless right now. So when a planet is motionless, and this is something I'm going to go a lot more deeper into. So on the website, we're wrapping up the planets series of lectures, and we're going to go into the aspects. And I'm teaching about the aspects and not just like, a trine and opposition, but actually all aspects are just synodic cycles. And so when you also look at a planet being motionless, that's a part of an aspect, in my opinion. And I'm kind of going into aspects in a really deep way that no one really else talks about. But Saturn's motionless. When a planet is not moving forward, but not moving backward, it feels stuck, because it is stuck. It's not really moving backwards yet, but it's not really moving forward. And the full moon is activating Saturn, right? So the moon, again, which is highlighting the night, highlighting the dark, bringing illumination to an area of our lives that we don't always get to see. And it's in Capricorn. It's like, hey, do you remember being a kid and you got in trouble about something that you didn't want people to know, or that you felt a lot of shame of, and you kind of had to suck it up and deal with it? That's what this full moon in Capricorn is. And it's ruled by Saturn in Aries, where Saturn has fallen, where it's like, hey, yeah, you've got to deal with this. Wherever Saturn is at in your chart, this full moon in Capricorn is showing you where you need to deal with it at, but it's showing you, hey, this isn't going to be easy. this is going to be hard. And while it can be fun and exciting at times, this is not the time to think of it as fun and exciting. This is the time to be like, hey, this is actually some work. This is actually not as simple as you think. And the full moon, the thing I wrote down is like, what is hidden is revealed, and it's too much weight. I think there's just going to be a level of, wow, okay, this is a serious moment, and I need to take it for what that is and respect this time. Astrology is a time honoring exercise. Not every day is going to be a feel good blast, and that's fine. That's not what today's for. That's not what Thursday's for. Thursday's for really looking at a part of your chart maybe you don't want to look at, a part of your life that you really don't want to look at, and really ask yourself, what do I need to do here? What do I need to detach my ego, suck it up, and just get it done? Because that's what this full moon is about. So then we get to Friday, and on Friday, the moon is then going to enter Aquarius. It will then make a trine to Uranus. We're going to get our first little lunar aspect to Uranus and Gemini. The moon will then sextile Saturn and Neptune. It's going to conjoin Pluto. So, what's really fun is now that all of the outer planets are at the very early degrees of the zodiac signs, we're going to start getting more void of course moons. And when the moon ingresses into zodiac sign, not only do you have like a change of energy there, but then it starts hitting all these planets almost immediately. And so as the moon goes into Aquarius, there is this more time of like being a little bit more intellectual, disconnecting to see an outside view, being a little bit more emotionally connected to people, society, all that stuff. But the moon's going to like really ping pong, and there's kind of this, again, detachment. And what did I write here? Playing with new curiosity. Like the moon in Aquarius trining Uranus is like detaching yourself from whatever you're investing in, whatever you're curious about now with Uranus and Gemini. And as the moon sextiles Saturn and Neptune, the thing I keep thinking about is when we get these trines to Saturn and Neptune, when we get these sextiles to Saturn and Neptune, it's really like, hey, you're trying to create a new reality of yourself. You're trying to literally mesh reality with fantasy. And every time we get these sextiles and these trines, something about whatever's going on at that moment is supporting that new vision. So the moon going into Aquarius, trining Uranus, it's like, this kind of exciting, like, whoa, what's this? And then it starts to sextile Saturn and Neptune. That is supportive of the new thing that you're trying to do. So that's really exciting. And then it conjoins Pluto, where you kind of have to face some fears around stuff. Like, I really do think more people struggle with fear than they realize. And I think as the moon conjoins Pluto, there is this, either being like, oh, I'm too scared to go out. I'm too scared to do any of these things. The world is ending, the sky is falling, or you can use that to empower yourself. Oftentimes the most scariest things that we ever do are often much more smaller in reality. And when we do confront those fears, there is a level of power that you can't get from anything else, because now you're not really scared of that thing that you resisted for so long. So there's some aspect of the moon conjoining Pluto of allowing yourself to like get out of your comfort zone, be scared, and do it anyway. And the last thing I wrote down for Friday was like just a new thought is going to help you move forward. So then we get to Saturday, and the moon's going to be still in Aquarius. It's going to make a trine to Venus and Gemini, and it's going to go opposite Mercury and Leo. And we have our last highlight of the week, which is Saturn going retrograde. So the moon in Aquarius trining Venus and Gemini. Awesome day for connecting with people, socializing. Like there's something, if you have an event to go to, I would go to it on Saturday, because there's something fun. And, like the moon in Aquarius is just talking with especially with Venus and Gemini. It's like chit-chatting here, chit-chatting there, shaking hands, kissing babies kind of a thing. And what I wrote down was like connecting and socialize, but the only thing is the moon's in Aquarius opposite Mercury and Leo. And the thing I wrote down was like, there's going to be a misread of some sort, because the moon in Aquarius is wanting to connect with everybody on an equal footing. But Mercury and Leo is being like, just saying whatever the fuck you feel like and being a little bit more disruptive and being more individualistic. And the moon, which is about like, the moon can be a lot of the times reading the room. Like, what is the vibe of the room? What is the feeling of the room? And it's opposing Mercury and Leo, which is someone might say something or blurt something out. Or maybe that's you. That kind of causes tension with that. And so if you're not out, if you're not socializing, that's fine too. I think the thing I would look at is if Mercury is about your ideas and your thoughts, and it's in Leo, where it's kind of just like really a servant of the sun right now, where it's thinking more in terms of, willpower and energy and, ego in a lot of ways. The moon going opposite that is there's like this emotional resistance to looking at those things. I think another way to look at it is if you are a performer on a stage, Mercury and Leo is thinking of all the stage plans, but the moon in Aquarius is asking you like, well, how does the audience feel about that? What is the perspective from out over here? So it's not really all that bad, but there is some like kind of like really looking at opposing forces here. But then we have Saturn stationing retrograde. Maybe it's because I have Saturn retrograde in my chart that I prefer Saturn being retrograde, but here's the thing. Saturn has been direct since like November, and it's been moving forward. And from November to I think it was February, it was moving forward in its shadow spot. So it was just cleaning up and kind of perfecting the stuff that we were already dealing with. Then starting, I think it was around February when Saturn left shadow, it moved forward into new territory. And then when Saturn moved into Aries, it moved into a new zodiac sign. And as Saturn moves forward, it's showing you, especially out of shadow into a new part of the zodiac, it's saying, hey, here are your new limitations. Here are your new walls. Here are your new boundaries. Here are your new responsibilities. Here are your new obligations. Deal with them. And as Saturn goes into Aries, it's like, okay, now it's even harder. And the analogy I've always used, and I will continue to use it because I think it's the best way to understand it, is it's like your first week on a job. You were getting on-the-spot training. When I was a server at a restaurant, I opened up a restaurant, and I mean, like the first 2 weeks was like, man, we're eating food. We're trying everything on the menu. We're laughing. We're having a good time. And then when you're no longer having on-the-spot training, when you're not trained by someone, you're out on your own, that's Saturn going retrograde. It's a little bit more serious. You kind of know what to do, but there's still a lot of things that you don't really know. You don't really know all of the people yet. You're not, being escorted by someone. You have to figure it out on yourself. And it's that first little time of being out on your own on this job. That's kind of a weird spot to be in, where it's like, okay, here's the work. Now do the work. You're not being introduced to it anymore. Now you know exactly what you have to do, and now you have to just suck it up and do it. And as Saturn continues to go retrograde, it gets easier and easier, especially after the opposition. The opposition we get is at the end of August, beginning of September. End of September. And after that opposition, Saturn retrograde becomes much, much easier because that's really the tense point of it. But as Saturn goes retrograde after this full moon in Capricorn, what I'm trying to sit here and say is there's a level of, okay, I have to suck it up and do this. And, the first day on the job is maybe annoying, and then maybe you start to like work, but then there's a certain part of that new job where you just kind of go like, God, I don't want to go to work. I don't want to do this. I'm not having all that fun because you're not comfortable. You're not confident in what you're doing yet. But it's these times where you stay disciplined with it and you stick to it and you commit to it, where the confidence comes after that. But this is not the time for the confidence. This is the time of just saying, okay, this is what I committed to and this is what I have to do. So there is a level of it kind of being hard, but also the whole thing is Saturn's conjoining Neptune right now. Like there is a level of, hey, what is reality and what is fantasy? And what do I want to make reality? What fantasies, what ideals do I have that I want to make reality? And then also realizing, hey, maybe this is a little bit confusing. Saturn going retrograde is going to start separating from Neptune. So the distance between what reality and fantasy is will go greater, and it'll be kind of easier to decipher which is which. But for right now, because they're so close, it's going to feel like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? Can I get to where I need to go? And I'm going to promise you that if you stick to it, you will. But it's February, not right now. Then we get to Sunday, and on Sunday, the moon is void for most of the day. So not much going on Sunday, kind of a lazy day, kind of stuck in the same feeling of what Saturday was. But later in the evening, I think it was like around 4 or 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, the moon is going to ingress into Pisces. And when the moon's ingressing into Pisces, it's no longer void. Now there's action going on. And it immediately squares Uranus. I totally didn't, like when I was writing this horoscope, I was like, holy shit, these moon and Pisces ingresses square Uranus and Gemini. That's going to be funny and funky. I don't know how to feel about that. One of the things I wrote was like later in the evening, there's going to be sporadic and chaotic sensitivity. The moon going into Pisces, we want to relax, we want to chill, we want to vibe. We're kind of a sponge, but it squares Uranus where it's erratic. If you've ever been, I can't think of an exact example in my head, but like at a restaurant, and maybe it's around that like 5 p.m. time and the music's a little bit quieter, and then for whatever reason, they crank up the music and they change the vibe, and you're like, it kind of just like jars you a little bit. That's kind of the Sunday evening. There's some sort of like, hey, I want to relax and be sensitive, but there's some sort of disruption that kind of jars that a little bit. That might make you a little bit more sensitive and a little bit more erratic than usual. But that brings us to next week. Mercury stations retrograde next week. So we have Saturn retrograde, Neptune retrograde, and Mercury going retrograde. Today, as I record this, I'm going to be sending out an email that the theme of July is really retrogrades. It's a time of slowing down. It's a time of honoring, hey, a lot just happened and move forward. I need to kind of reflect. I need to kind of like trace my steps back. I need to really, watch the footage from the game and figure out what I did right and what I did wrong. And so next week really emphasizes the slowdown. And so I think that's a good thing if you feel like you're not going a million miles an hour in the direction that you want to. It's really a slowdown. It's really a re-strategizing time. Next week, we have Venus making a sextile to Mercury too, which is fun. And Mars conjoins the South Node, one of my favorite transits. I can't wait to dump a bunch of shit when Mars conjoins the South Node. So we'll talk a lot about more of that next week. And with that being said, I love and appreciate you guys. Comment below. Let me know what's going on for you. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll be seeing you guys next week.